today our group will present and explain about our topic, which is Malaysia Election Commission is a body that is responsible to handle the process of election in Malaysia. So we have to discuss the function of Election Commission in Malaysia. As an introduction, Malaysia is one of the countries that practice a democratic system. Democracy is a form of government with the power to make laws and the structure of government determined by the people. In a democratic system, laws are enacted either by the people or representatives elected by the people. A country or government that adopts a democratic system is called a democratic state or government. Democracy is a system of government in which everyone of a country or state that involved in making decisions about its affairs, usually by vote to elect representatives to a parliament or similar assembly. In Malaysia, people or citizens have the right to choose the government that leads the country by voting during elections. Elections in Malaysia include elections to public office of the political entities that since 1963 have comprised the Federation of Malaysia. At present, elections in Malaysia exist at two levels, which is federal level and state level.
And now I will explain the study and redelineate parliamentary and state electoral boundaries not less than every 8 years after the date of the previous study and redelineation that has been complete. Constituency delineation is the drawing of boundaries in the context of elections in order to prevent any sort of imbalance of the voting population across all polling districts within the nation. The Election Commission in Malaysia is empowered to conduct the constituency delineation exercise as provided for in Article 113 Section 2(1) of the Federal Constitution. The Election Commission need to conduct his redelineation exercise no less than 8 years after the last redelineation exercise. The objective of the delineation exercise is to ensure that each constituency has approximately equal number of voters so as to enable equal representation of each constituency in the parliament. However, in reality, it would be close to impossible to achieve this perfect balance of equal representation, as spelled out in Section 2C of the 13th Schedule of the Federal Constitution. The number of voters for rural constituency can be lower than the average number of voters for each constituency. The reason for this is that if one were to try draw boundaries of the constituency in a rural area to ensure the number of voters are equal, the constituency will be very big in area. Therefore, a measure of weightage for area ought to be given to make the constituency smaller in area. This will then, or could, have the effect of reducing the number of voters in that constituency. However, it must be borne in mind that the general principle is that the number of voters in each constituency instead ought to be approximately equal. This is the constitutional requirement and universal practice. The current delineation of the boundaries in Selangor is imperfect. For instance, in Selangor, the Sabah Benam Federal Constituency has 37,318 voters. In comparison, the Subang Federal Constituency in Selangor has. This will put the representative of the area in a disadvantaged position as he will have difficulties in, for example, reaching out to the various voters in his constituency. 128,542 voters. This means that one person's vote in Sabah Benam is equivalent to approximately 3.5% vote in Subang. This is called malapportionment. The number of voters in each constituency in Selangor and other states are disproportionate. This results in unequal voting power for different group of voters. Gerrymandering is also a term which is quite similar to malapportionment in that it is capable of thwarting the concept of fair and equal representation. It is the act of manipulation of boundaries to favour one party or class. In other words, the electoral boundaries are altered to change the composition of voters to increase a certain party chance in winning the elections. This can be done in two ways. Firstly, by concentrating the opponent's voter in particular area, and secondly, by diluting the opponent voters in another area. The result is the opponent would win less seats as compared to the ruling party. The manner in which the boundaries are moved might be to ensure that more seats will be won by a certain party. For example, by moving voters according to the previous voting trend. This would normally result in weirdly shaped constituency. Election Commission proposed recommendation of redesignation can be objected to be by the public, any state government, local authority or group of 100 or more affected voters in the constituency whose name are on the current electoral rolls may object to the proposed recommendation. This is provided for in 13 Schedule Part 2, Section 5 of the Federal Constitution. The delineation proposal don't have to be approved by the Dewan Rakyat with 2/3 majority. It only requires a simple majority to approve delineation proposals. If the delineation includes seat increase, the Dewan Rakyat need to amend Article 46 of the Federal Constitution, first with 2/3 majority. Article 46 determine that the number of parliamentary constituencies in each state should have election commission has completed the whole delineation exercise within 2 years from the commencement of it. That will be from when the new recommended boundaries are published in the Gazette newspapers. The exercise is deemed complete when the election commission submit the proposal to the Prime Minister. It is incumbent upon the Election Commission to ensure that the elections and redelineation and preparation of electoral rolls leading up to the 14th general election is free and fair. The Election Commission has to be entirely independent. Article 114(2) of the Federal Constitution states that in appointing members of the Election Commission and the Yang di-Pertuan Agong shall have regard to the importance of securing an election commission which enjoy public confidence. Therefore, with our federal constitution recognizing the principle of free and fair election, with our judiciary recognizing the election commission roles as the custodian of the free and fair elections, it is absolutely crucial that the election commission perform its task of delineation with an overarching duty to be just, independent and equitable to all fragments of our society. Thank you.
So, Assalamualaikum, Miss Zulaika. So, we will start with the function of Malaysian Election Commission. The first function of Election Commission in Malaysia is to conduct election for House Representative or State Legislative Assembly and its conduct by election once there are any empty seats on Parliament. Not only in general election, they are also responsible to manage on small election that involve maybe 1 or 2 seats, and state election in any state decide to dissolve their state legislative assembly. DC might be empty because of the incumbent of the seats died or resigned from his or her position, and it automatically the seats is empty. Seems like in general election, this small election will involve campaigning and give a manifesto from contesting candidates for the seats offered, and it will happen during campaign period and usually around 14 days to gain the trust from the voter. This function we can elaborate with the Sabah state election that currently happened in Malaysia on 26 September 2020 after they decide to dissolve their legislative assembly on 30th July 2020 after the application to dissolve the assembly from their chief minister on that time was approved by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong Negeri of Sabah, Tun Johar Mahiruddin. They decide to dissolve it because of Malaysian political crisis that happened on early 2020, and Sabah also impressed because of the crisis. We know that year 2020 is the challenges year for Malaysia because we are facing pandemic issues started around December 2019, and not long after that our former Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad resigned from his position and left the position empty. It caused our Yang di-Pertuan Agong Sultan Abdullah Rakyatuddin need to make a decision, confidential decision with all the member of parliaments and his king officer in order to appoint new prime minister due to current parliament just formed. Hence, he decided to appoint Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin as the prime minister on 1st March 2020 until now. After that, government decided to implement movement control order on 18 March 2020 due to COVID-19 cases rise drastically, and it's still implemented until now. Okay, we're back to Sabah state election. After this legislative assembly dissolved, all existing parties took the opportunity to compete in this election. They sent their representative and delegate to compete for the seat. They need to register their representative with Malaysia Election Commission as usual, and candidate nominate day is set on 12 September. After that, only they can start campaign in order to gain voter trust. As usual, we know that they will scatter promise and manifesto at Sabah during the campaign period. And after the election settle, as a result, we know that Gabungan Rakyat Sabah, that coalition by Parti Barisan Nasional, Perikatan Nasional and Parti Sabah Bersatu, Parti Bersabah Satu, Bersatu Sabah, managed to win the majority seats, 37 out of 38 seats that contest. And we know that Haji Noor was appointed as the new Chief Minister of our Cabinet of Sabah and also as the State Minister of Finance of Sabah since then.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Fatina Bila binti Isham. I will explain further regarding on my point, which is point 3. Undertake the process of voters registration and electoral roll review. In exercise of the powers conferred by Section 15 of the Election Act 1958, the Election Commission, with the approval of the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, makes the following regulation. Part 1 is preliminary. So regulation 1 is regarding on citation, application and commencement. So this regulation may be cited as the election, which is registration of electors regulation 2002. So this regulation applied throughout Malaysia, and this regulation come into operation on 16 July 2002. Regulation 2 is interpretation. In this regulation, unless the context otherwise require Chief Registrar, Registrar and Assistant Registrar means respectively the Chief Registrar of Electors, Registrar of Electors and Assistant Registrar of Electors appointed under Section 8 of the Election Act 1958. Adjudicating officer means an adjudicating officer appointed under Section 8 of Election Act 1958. And then we have absent voter, means a citizen who has attained the age of 21 years on the qualifying date. So example of the absent voter is first, a serving member of any regular naval, military or air force of Malaysia, the Commonwealth or other country. So second one is the spouse of a serving member of any force referred to in paragraph A who elects to become an absent voter. And then third one is in the public service of the government of Malaysia or of any state, or in the service of any local authority or statutory authority exercising powers vested in by federal or state law, who is on duty outside the boundaries of Peninsular Malaysia or Sabah or Sarawak, and etc. Regulation 3 is registration areas and registered units. So each parliamentary constituency units consists of the state constituency on the polling district and shall constitute a registration area. So each polling district shall constitute a separate registration unit in a registration area. So the third one is the principal electoral roll of the supplementary electoral roll shall be framed in separate parts for each registration unit in the registration area. Regulation 4 is separate letter for each registration unit. So there shall be a separate letter or letters or number or numbers or both for each registration unit, and such letter or letters or numbers or both shall be deemed to form part of an elector's number in the principal electoral roll or the supplementary electoral roll. So the next part is the principal electoral roll. So the function of electoral is the electoral roll shall contains the name, full addresses and details of all voters, including without limitation particular of the identity card issue to the voter pursuant to the National Registration Act 1959, revised 1972. So particulars of the identity card issue to any serving member of the Armed Force of Malaysia or of any local force established under any written law in force in Malaysia, where an official identity card or other document of identity is normally issued to members of such force, or particular of any other official of identity issue or held by a voter other than identity card identity card issue pursuant to the National Registration Act 1959, revised by 1972. So, all postal or absent voters shall have their names crosses out from the principal electoral roll with a marked PP, which is mean pengundi post, shown on an extra column on the extreme right against their name, and a separate postal or absent voters roll shall be prepared for such name crosses out. So for the purpose of revision, the registrar shall every 2 to 3 months prepare a provisional list of the names of electors from the principal electoral roll who have died or have become disqualified for registration, and the registrar shall update the principal electoral roll by deleting the names of electors who have died or have become disqualified for registration. In preparing a aforementioned list, the registrar shall obtain the required information from reports lodged with the Royal Malaysian Police Force, information maintained by the National Registration Department, and through copies of documents maintained in the registry of the court. But that's all for my part. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. My name is Nurul Ishaniza binti Abdullah, and now it's my part is a conclusion. The conclusion is, in the nutshell, elections are very important for all Malaysians because they are the ones of who determines the future of the country. The elections results show the attitude of voters towards the ruling party in the future. With this, it can be concluded that the election are not only important in terms of the practice of democracy, but the involvement of the people as a voter is very, very important in governing. With this, the people can learn and understand the true meaning of democracy through the election campaign. The people can understand the unity of the voice of the people and leaders. Indirectly, the people can appreciate, respect the concept of the freedom of the speech. In addition, people can determine themselves the direction of development in their area in accordance with their way of for life and economic activity. This is help people act wisely in planning the future of their lives. Therefore, they need to make wise choices to ensure that their area lives in develops and thrives. The manifesto that the party has promised can run smoothly, and the people will no longer complain about previous failures, which is why it is very important the election are held. Lastly, the central and state governments can focus on their respective policies at the central and state levels without any interference and grievance at the level ordinary society. This will definitely make the public sector work culture more efficient. A person elected during an election must be honest and feel responsible for their position has been given.